I'm going to give a very brief introduction, but then I'm going to hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves more in depth. And really, I want to exemplify the expertise that is sitting at this table. We've got decades upon decades of expertise here, and I don't want to shortchange that. So with that, we've got Chief Drennan, who is the City of South Lake Tahoe Fire and Rescue Chief. We've got Sheriff Coverly, who is the Douglas County Sheriff's Office Sheriff, head of Douglas County Sheriff's Office, sorry. We were going to have Brett Compston, who is the Chief of Nevada Division of Emergency Management. And unfortunately, he was called to testify at the state legislature, so he could not make it. He did, however, submit a comment letter that is part of the record now, if you would like to review that. We have Don O'Keefe, who is the Chief of Law Enforcement for Cal OES. We have Kelly Echeverria, who is the Emergency Management Administrator for Washoe County Emergency Management. And we are also joined by Troy Morton, who is the Emergency Services Manager for El Dorado County Sheriff Office of Emergency Services. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Kelly, and maybe you can all do a brief introduction, talk about your expertise and experience in this field, and then we'll kick it off.
Hi there, Kelly Echeverria, Washoe County Emergency Manager. Gosh, do you want the life and times of Kelly Echeverria? You can go back pretty far. I've lived and worked in emergency management in our region since 2012, and have responded to everything from tornadoes to wildfire and anything in between. One of our other 13 hazards, both locally and at the national level. With wildfire and evacuation specifically, emergency managers pride themselves on being a subject matter expert of emergency management only, but bringing together the subject matter experts, much like Dr. McIntyre has done today. But we've really taken a deep dive on evacuations, and we're investing ourselves in creating a more resilient community so that we can stay safe because disasters happen. And I'm very grateful for all of my partners at the table today and for Dr. McIntyre and TRPA for having this conversation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dan Coverly. I'm the Douglas County Sheriff. Thanks for having me today. Evacuations are a huge concern with the residents here in Douglas County, not only at the lake, but down in the valley. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 28 years, the last 7 as the Sheriff, and I've been involved in probably at least a couple evacuations every year in various parts of the county. Most of them are fairly small, but with the Tamarack and the Caldor fire, those were large evacuations. And I think one thing to stress is the law enforcement and fire service cooperate very well. The Sheriff's Offices up here, El Dorado, Washoe, we're all on the same page, and we're prepared, and we've done this quite a bit. But we're always improving, always training, always trying to do better. And I think communication is the key, not only amongst ourselves, but with the public, and the forewarning and preparedness. And I think that's being done here today and continuing to talk about. So I think this is, I appreciate being brought in on this, and I think this is an important topic. And so thank you.
Good morning, Troy Morton. As she said, I'm a lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office, but my assignment is the director of the County Emergency Operations Center that activates during an emergency to coordinate the incident, and also the Office of Emergency Services. I've been with the Sheriff's Office just over 20 years. I've been in my position for 5 years. I was here for Caldor Fire, so I was overseeing the operations from the county end for that incident. You mentioned Angora. I was a newer deputy that did door-to-door notifications on Angora, and been involved at some level with every fire in our county for the last 20 years. Thank you for having me.
Well, good morning, everyone. On behalf of Governor Newsom and our director, Nancy Ward, thank you for inviting us to this today. My name is Don O'Keefe. I currently am the Chief of Law Enforcement for Cal OES. I'm the statewide law enforcement mutual aid coordinator on a statewide basis, as well as mass fatalities. I've been with Cal OES for 3.5 years, but I have 45 years in law enforcement. Started with the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, where I retired as a captain, but I had at one of my commands was the Office of Emergency Services. I left there and went and became the police chief in the city of Half Moon Bay, which I was also the deputy emergency manager. And over in Half Moon Bay, our biggest concerns were earthquakes and tsunamis, especially when you only really had 2 roads, maybe 3, for evacuation in the event of, especially an earthquake. And then I kind of take a hiatus, and I became the United States Marshal for the Northern District of California under President Obama, as I was appointed by President Obama during his administration. So there's a lot with Cal OES that is, it's nonstop. And I have learned a lot through, just the 3.5 years I've been here and working with these fine individuals from, fire law and our emergency managers. So thank you again for having me.
Good morning. My name is Jim Drennan. I'm the fire chief for the city of South Lake Tahoe, South Lake Tahoe Fire Rescue. Started my career back in 1998, so pushing 27 years-ish with the city since 2000. And I've been the current fire chief since 2022. During Caldor, I was the city liaison and actively involved and engaged with that fire from the beginning. So I was actually traveling back and forth to Placerville every day, working alongside El Dorado County Sheriffs, South Lake Tahoe PD, and then the city's EOC as well with the county's EOC. In terms of the Caldor fire and Tamarack fire, Angora, Gondola, each one of those had different requirements for evacuations. And we learned a lot from all of those. The Caldor fires, we'll discuss later, was definitely a learning experience for all of us. Ultimately, I feel it was a success, but we'll get into more of that discussion later. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for having us. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you all. I do want to mention that we have representatives from the Forest Service, Tahoe Conservancy, Nevada Division of State Lands, and CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE, I believe, is online. So if there are any questions that specifically come up for those partners, we also have them on tap. We've really loaded the bench today. So I'll kick us off. We have an amazing breadth of expertise here at the table, and we just want to thank you again for being here. This is top of the mind for so many in the community. We have continuously heard this from the public, and so we really appreciate you taking the time to come speak with us. To kick off our panel, we'd love to discuss the emergency response landscape. Specifically, how has emergency response changed in recent years for the region, and what are your agencies doing differently now compared to maybe 5 or 10 years ago?
I guess I'm diving into this one first. So at least on the South Shore, and I would say arguably the entire basin, and even into our neighbors of Douglas County and down on the West Slope, for a long time, arguably since around the Angora fire, even the Gondola fire, agencies have been actively engaged with fuels management, higher levels of training, active participation through Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs Association, where we're trying to coordinate projects, share resources, mutual aid, auto aid. Following the Caldor fire, I think there was a concerted increase in the idea of coordinating efforts in a manner that had never really been done before in the basin. TFFT and Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs have certainly done a lot of work over the last 2 decades. Here on the South Shore, I can speak just for our agency and for our neighboring agencies. We developed the South Shore Fuels Division, which incorporates several agencies: South Lake Tahoe, Lake Valley. We coordinate with Tahoe Douglas, Forest Service, CAL FIRE, Tahoe Regional Conservation District, California Tahoe Conservancy, TRPA even. And what that does is it allows us to do a lot of fuels management without regard to jurisdictional lines. And really the concept being that fire doesn't know whose property it is and doesn't really care. And I look at it in terms of really trying to educate on the concept of needing, there is no real magic bullet, right? So all of the agencies have been doing have had a tremendous effort put forth for educating about home hardening, fuel breaks, shaded fuel breaks, fuel reduction, and doing it in an environmentally conscious way and making sure that we're doing what we need to do for the agencies in the area, but also recognizing where the priorities are. So that's probably the biggest change in terms of what's happened differently. Our response times have always been pretty fast. We operate really well together, and I would say we had a pretty good success in terms of Christmas Valley with Caldor. That was sort of proof of that.
Well, of course, my perspective is on a statewide basis. So what we're seeing is almost year-round fire season. If we don't have a fire and a good point of that is the LA fires in January. We're having flooding in the Central Valley, the Tulare Basin. I don't know if you ever saw that. It was just amazing when I took a tour of that with Sheriff Robinson from Kings County. But we're seeing that these incidents are becoming more impactful to populations. There needs to be more government assistance. And at the state level, we're looking at all government approach, if you will. Once the governor declares a state of emergency, which is based on local declarations, we put together what's called a unified command group. And these are all the state agencies that during a state of emergency come under the Director Ward, who's the director of the Office of Emergency Services, but she's also the Homeland Security Advisor to the governor. So we look at this all government approach to these disasters to assist. And we're not out in the field doing this work. Back in the day, I remember when I was a sheriff's deputy going fires, and I've been surrounded twice by fire, mostly getting large animals out. So we see that happening. Kind of some of the things that we've done is, we have a full-time state emergency operations center. We have placed more of our staff, mostly our emergency services coordinators, in local EOCs throughout we call operating areas. Site is
Audio check for our online members. Are you able to hear us in the room?
I can hear it now.
Yep, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for your flexibility. We are back online. Madam Chair, we're gonna get back going, okay? And I think Kat can remind us where we are.
Thank you.
Yes, we left off talking about what are your agencies doing differently now compared to 5 to 10 years ago in relation to emergency response? Troy?
All right. So obviously fires are more common. So we're actually doing live evacuations, real evacuations all the time. On the West Slope, we've already done evacuations with orders this summer, which is a little early for evacuation orders, honestly. With every real emergency, there's a debrief and lessons learned and improvements. So every time we do an evacuation, we look at how it went and ways to improve it. So that's always improving it by having, unfortunately, these emergencies. The Board of Supervisors authorized my team to increase by 2 this couple years ago. And with that, we added a fire captain to our OES team. It was always just sheriff's office staff. Now there's 1 fire captain that works there. It's a different perspective, different training, and just different ideas on how to manage things. So that was a great improvement. Definitely more training for law enforcement staff on evacuations, but also county staff in general, because they have a portion of the emergency. Evacuations are one thing, but there's a lot more that goes into it, like public messaging and care and shelter, than just evacuations. We also have increased our community preparedness through outreach, and that's both in-person town halls on both slopes of the county, as well as social media campaigns. We have a social media outreach basically committee that's countywide, including all the fire partners, law partners, to share each other's messages to get the word out. Definitely more regional training. We started 2 years ago hosting an annual evacuation workshop, we're calling it, in the Basin. And that's all law and fire in the Basin come together for a day. This year it's at the end of June. And we basically talk through a couple real bad fire scenarios on a real bad day in Tahoe where there's a lot of visitors. That's something I don't know that's been done for quite a while before the last few years. Again, like the chief said, I echo everything he said as well. But that brings together all of us, including our Nevada partners, on how we're going to handle Caldor number 2, but maybe on a holiday or something like that. We plan for the worst case, train for the worst case, and then everything else should be a little simpler when it comes. We are doing targeted outreach now, which we've never really done before. We started with Spanish-speaking population and elderly population, like Chief O'Keefe mentioned. Those are more at risk during emergencies, so we're taking that more serious and doing targeted outreach for those populations. I believe Chief Drennan mentioned it, but there's the Basin Lake Tahoe evacuation plan. All agencies around the lake came together to put that plan together. It was a big process, so lots of agencies involved. That is a general overview of the processes that each jurisdiction uses. It's not a tactical plan that we use. Our plans are very flexible based on the incident, but putting that together gave the public something, but also it brought all of us together every month for, I don't know, a year to talk about our processes. And we ironed a lot of things out just being in the same room. Like he mentioned, Lake Tahoe Fire Chiefs Association brought us together for that. So that was great. Yeah, and that was all I had for this. I think the technology questions later. Thank you.
So we've done a lot of things very similar to El Dorado County. One of the biggest changes in probably the last 5 years is the preparation and the planning aspect of it. Law enforcement and fire, we're great at responding to the emergency as it's happening, right? We're very good at that. What I think we've done a better job at is the planning, and the regional evacuation plan is a good example of that. But within Douglas County, every deputy is mandated fire training every year. So that's not only so we know what we're doing, but to keep them safe as they're responding to do evacuations. The other thing is we've been in constant contact with our neighboring jurisdictions. Okay, so before you could always ask for help and you'd get help, but now we're talking about the incident ahead of time. So we're kind of on the same page. The other thing that we're doing in Douglas County is because you've got that influx and outflux of residents and visitors, and the demographic and the resident makeup is changing constantly. So we're reminding people to sign up for 911 notifications and the app that we'll talk about later, where to get the information when the incident is happening and how we're going to communicate with them in the event of an evacuation and what we're going to do and what we expect them to do. And then the other big thing is to reassure them that yes, we have a plan, and we practice and we plan, and we actually do this a lot more than people probably realize. But the evacuation part of it is as important to us as it is to the residents, and we want them to know that. So I think we've done a better job with that in the last couple of years in communicating that.
So in Washoe County, we recently have changed our operational model within the Emergency Operations Center to better support our partners in the field and our community. We've switched to an incident support model, which is also what the Nevada Division of Emergency Management is moving to, as well as Carson City. We've tested it. We tested it last week and the week before on a major earthquake tabletop exercise, and it went really well. We found areas for improvement. That's nothing new. We're constantly testing our processes and trying to improve them as frequently as we can. But we have attempted to increase collaboration. Gosh, a year or two ago, we started the Tahoe EMs group, and we meet regularly to share plans, training, introduce ourselves to one another so that when something does happen, that collaboration is more seamless across jurisdictional boundaries. We are trying to take a more strategic approach, especially when it comes to evacuations. This year, we'll be conducting an evacuation study that includes fire and traffic modeling, looking at those choke points and implementing hopefully mitigation measures to overcome those, to have a more seamless evacuation throughout the Washoe region. That includes the city of Reno, the city of Sparks. And then we leverage technology, which I know we're headed into a little bit more of that, but we want to increase communication and allow our community to have more efficient and effective decision-making regarding their own safety. A lot of times we see people don't leave, and that is never a good option when a threat is near. So I can talk a little bit more about that next.
Thanks so much for the responses. This is Ashley Conrad-Seda for the record. Just as a follow-up to all of you, I mean, it sounds like you're really doing great work in terms of preparedness and training. You've all mentioned demographic changes in this, 5 to 10 year period as well, and people not leaving. What mechanisms are you using to communicate ahead of time the importance of leaving in various languages, right? The importance, especially for elderly populations that might have a hard time leaving or might not want to leave because they've been through 4 or 5, fires. What are the mechanisms, or what's the opportunity for folks to find that information? And this might come up in the technology question, so I can also hold it.
I like to say every technological means available to us is how we're going to communicate. But we heard a lot from various communities throughout the region. I just don't know what to expect. And so we tried to create a preparedness video to set those expectations for the community so that they knew what was coming and when to leave, and they could make those decisions. We did it in English and Spanish. We have a Tagalog version ready to go. Those are our top 3 languages in Washoe County, but then we also have American Sign Language overlaid with those videos, and those are available on YouTube and on our website.
I would just echo what she said. We're really using just about every mechanism short of a telegraph. Yeah, we push a lot out through social media. We also push or try to educate the public on different apps that are available, whether it's Rave or Perimeter or Watch Duty. And there's a host of others, but we'll reach out through any means necessary, more or less. And we're really, I think all of us are in agreement, the concept of very early notification. So anything that looks like it could turn into something we're going to ask people to leave earlier than normal.
And I think just on a statewide basis, we at Cal OES with our crisis communication and with our planning and preparedness group, have developed, videos in support of our counties. There was a fire, I think it was the McKinney fire, a very sad case where a fast moving fire went through the Klamath, the river area there, and for people who just refuse to leave. And, you can go door to door and you can do whatever, but it's just sometimes people are not going to do it. In this case, unfortunately, both were killed. They just refuse to leave their home.
Great. You teed us up nicely for the next question. I would love to hear, how are your agencies using new technologies? We heard a little bit about that, but things like apps, geographic information systems, social media to improve early warning systems and public communication.
Can I jump on that?
Yeah.
So we have implemented something called Perimeter. Hopefully you're all familiar with it. If not, it's perimetermap.com. It is the same all the time. It's a link, so people don't have to download an app. However, there is an app for first responders, emergency management, dispatch, to all beyond. So the Perimeter offers two things. One is behind the scenes communication between emergency management, dispatch, and first responders to share situational awareness. And then the second is kind of that same thing, but with vetted information for the public. So we used it in Davis Fire. We had 2.4 million visitors to that website. So you're always excited to see a product come through and have results come out of it. But what I really heard a lot from the evacuating population was that they were checking it to see how the situation was developing. And having been evacuated myself before, can only imagine that provides a little bit more peace of mind as to what's happening in their community. So very grateful for that application on many levels. It's being used by Washoe, Carson, Douglas, Story. We're bringing on Lyon County, Nye County, White Pine will be next year, Elko. Anyways, they're all but 5 counties in Nevada by the end of next year, hopefully. And then it's also being used in California as well. We've also brought on Rave. Just after Davis Fire, we switched our alerting system to Rave because it allowed us the very awesome capability of communicating with our friends and neighbors who have access and functional needs. So it's something we've been looking for a decade, was the capability to let people know if they should need a little bit extra time to evacuate. And so this application actually offers two-way communication when it comes to that. If they're not able to evacuate for whatever reason, but they do have to sign up for Smart 911 and indicate that they have access and functional needs for us to have that capability to communicate with them. But I know that Rave is also being used by our other communities around the lake. And so I think it just adds to that seamless response and support with one another. Thank you.
So we're doing everything that they're doing. They got it first, but I think we thought about doing it before then. But one of the benefits is that we're all using the same system. So there's some consistency and familiarity for any of the users, not only the agencies, but the public also. So if there's on Perimeter, if you're, have a family member in Washoe County, but you live in Douglas County, you're able to see what's going on and be notified and in that way. So the technology is a huge game changer, and I think it will only get better. It will only improve, and the access will improve. And so it's very, it's cutting edge, and it's just going to get better. So I think that for evacuation, and not just for the evacuation itself, but for the information on where to go. And a good example of the Caldor Fire, when South Lake Tahoe evacuated, they went into Douglas County. And so even though we weren't faced with the fire right away, we still felt the effect of, and vice versa. If the North Shore would evacuate, depending on which way they go, they're going to, so especially here in the Basin, we're going to be involved to some level, irregardless of where the incident is, just because of the limits in access and where we can go. So it's very important that we're all on the same page, and we are. So I think that's huge.
Thank you, Sheriff Coverly. You actually teed me up for my next question. So I love that. we know that Lake Tahoe is a fire dependent ecosystem and we are not immune to wildfires. Gondola, Angora, Emerald, Caldor. I'd love to hear from kind of the local resources on the panel. What lessons were learned from past wildfire evacuations? Example, Angora or Caldor, and how have they led to changes in evacuation planning? We've touched on that a little bit, but I think the group would like to hear a little bit more.
All right, well, I'll put my head on the chopping block here for a minute. During the Caldor fire, there was a tremendous amount of planning leading up to pulling that trigger for evacuation. That was coordinated between the city, El Dorado County Sheriff, state, Caltrans, CHP, et cetera, et cetera. We really believed at the time that we were doing great work. And I would say the end result was still a positive, no injuries, no deaths. The city was evacuated. We were able to operate in that area very successfully. The failure was we blew it with our communication to our neighbors to the east. So that's all of the western counties of Nevada, not just Douglas or Washoe, but Carson City and even further on than that. I think there was an expectation of sorts that Cal OES was talking to Nevada DEM, and that probably wasn't happening to the level that we all thought it would have been. Add to that, and the lieutenant can probably back me up on this. We had planned for a sort of programmatic step-by-step evacuation of the city, and that didn't take place because loose lips sync, whatever. Yeah. So that message got out prematurely. And I'm not going to throw anybody on the bus on that one, but it went out early, and that created everybody moving all at the same time to the city, and we ended up with a parking lot near State Line. In any evacuation, nobody's moving at 60 miles an hour, so that's not a reasonable expectation for an evacuation. And I would still argue that given the pace and scale of the Caldor fire and understanding the timing of it, we were still very, very far ahead of the curve in terms of danger to the community. And I think that was managed well. People were frustrated. Early on, there were some there were some criticisms of that evacuation process, but in my mind, it revolved around people being irritated and, sort of put out, when reality was they weren't being chased by flame. There was no real imminent danger at the time. This was a very forward-thinking process that we were trying to accomplish. The lessons learned were you really cannot over-communicate, and you have to be reaching out, not just to the county next door, but to the county next door to them, and so on. Because when you evacuate the basin, it's going to impact Northern Nevada, Northern California. Keep in mind as well, being a tourist town, a tourist region, Highway 50 had been closed for 10 days. A large portion of the South Lake Tahoe population had already left. So if you were to argue that the city alone had a population of around 22,000 people, you add the county and maybe, the communities here at State Line, pushing 30,000 maybe. I'm going to guess that number was closer to 12, 14, because we did not have tourist traffic here. They had been gone for quite some time, and an awful lot of the permanent residents were already gone. So we had a lot of things in our favor, honestly. That's prompted what the lieutenant brought up here a minute ago, where we're trying to model and practice for that same event happening with more of a fast-moving event near a holiday weekend, which is going to be much more problematic, but I feel that we're doing an awful lot of work to get there. So
there's a lot to that question. So a major part of evacuations that I think a lot of people don't think is the traffic controls. Telling everyone door to door to leave is important, but not if they can't leave because there's traffic. We did have traffic control in place at every stoplight, as far as you could see, but just the amount of them being in sync is what also matters. We were watching it on the Highway 50 cameras from the EOC that some cops, and keep in mind, This incident, we had, Douglas County NHP, CHP, South Lake PD, the sheriff's office, and about 60 cops per day in mutual aid from as far as Santa Barbara. So this wasn't our South Lake Tahoe City Police cops and sheriff's office necessarily running these traffic control points. This could have been cops from the Bay Area, from Stockton. So we were watching traffic control not go as smooth as it could, which was 50 just being dumped into Nevada at once. We were watching sometimes some cops would let traffic go for 3 minutes on 50 and then let side streets go. Some were letting 50 just go and go and go. So, and that's hard to coordinate when you don't have all one agency doing it, because you have to find the law branch. They have to get a hold of that specific cop at that light, and all of them have to be in sync to get 50 moving. So that's a complicated thing, especially with Caldor and the resources that are not local up here. So that's one big lesson learned and what we work on coordinating. I think in emergency management, you have to know who to call, and you have to know they're going to help you, and we have to know each other's processes. So working with Nevada more and our agencies more, we know that when that occurs again, representatives from all law enforcement that are running that traffic model will be at the command post or EOC together with comms to their people to make sure that 50 is open and traffic is being controlled more efficiently than it was. Like the chief said, I still think it was a success. In El Dorado County, we evacuate earlier than probably a lot of counties, especially in Tahoe, because we know that's part of the reason why we pulled the trigger a little earlier on that evacuation. Like the chief said, we did want to section it out. That's how we do evacuations if we get the chance. It didn't happen that way. And like he said, more communication with our partners in Nevada. There was some shelter on the sheltering side of things, even more miscommunication, because we actually did have to set up shelters in Nevada, something I don't know when the last time that occurred was, if ever. So obviously that came up, but all those have led to, like I said, the workshops we're hosting. It's a complex. The more agencies you have involved, the more communication is going to fail, and communication is always the first thing to fail in the emergency. So it's just that communication and staying tight with each other in the off season and preparing for fire season, so we're ready when it actually happens.
I think the biggest lesson that I took away from both the Tamarack fire and the Caldor fire was time. So time can be your greatest ally, or it can be your worst enemy. And the pre-planning and the preparation ahead of time helps you with time on the positive side. So all of the defensible space, the hardening of houses and stuff, that allows for that gives the evacuation time, which is key. It's always going to be a traffic jam. It's always going to be a mess. But doing your evacuations as early as you can is key. One of the thing that I will never forget was a presentation given to me by the Butte County Sheriff right after the Camp Paradise fire, and that I had a hard time sleeping. That scared me to death, and so that will remain with me forever. Time is your best friend if you use it wisely. And sometimes you may not have that time, and you're just going to have to make it work, which I think we're pretty good at. But if you can, then you got to use time. Another shout out, or just a brief shout out to the fire service. They can predict the movement of a wildfire almost to the second. It is amazing. And so if you are working with your partners in the fire service and they are saying that hits this trigger point, gets this point, then that's what you need. It is incumbent on the law enforcement side to pay attention to that and to be able to do that, because they can predict. The Tamarack fire was crazy how accurate it was, and Caldor also. And I think that's what helped with that evacuation out of South Lake, which didn't go perfectly, but it still went, and no one got caught. No one was hurt, and yeah, was it a big traffic jam? Yep. And yes, I wish they'd have called us, but it all worked. And, so it was successful in the end, but we can do better. And I think we would, if it happened again today, that same circumstance, it would be much different, and it would be better organized and more successful.
I think from the emergency management perspective, I'm going to echo some of the sentiments that Chief Drennan started with, which is cross-border collaboration. from Washoe County's perspective, we had Dixie Fire happening to the north in California and Caldor Fire happening to the south, and both looking to evacuate into Washoe County through Douglas and Carson. And we did have to open a shelter where we had residents from both fires staying. So happy to support our neighbors to the west at any time ever. But I think since then, we've, through all of the things that I described earlier, have worked on partner inclusion and collaboration across jurisdictional boundaries. We've also added the capability through Perimeter of letting people know that they need to be prepared to evacuate. So they're not in an evacuation zone, but they can see that they are in a zone that needs to be prepared, which is something that we did use in Davis Fire. And I mean, that fire modeling that they did for us for September 11th last year was incredibly scary, looking to go all the way up to the city of Reno. And so to include those zones and give people that time to pack their bags and make plans for their pets and their families was something that we didn't have during Caldor or Dixie Fire, but is part of what lends to it looking so different if it were to happen today.
Yeah, just from a state perspective, the Caldor Fire, again, before I got here, but now we have at least once, sometimes twice a year meetings with Nevada DEM in California and then folks in the Tahoe Basin to talk about these issues. Recently, well, I don't know how many months ago it was now, but if you remember, Interstate 15 was shut down due to a lithium-ion battery type issue. They had to close Interstate 15 going into Las Vegas, and so California, the state, is getting more involved with working with our neighbors in Nevada, Oregon, and Arizona, because I think it really does come down to the communication and being prepared for any type of emergency.
Great, thank you all. I am going to turn it over to the board to see if there are any questions that board members might have. I don't want to hog all the time.
I think we're going to go just around the horn because I feel like everyone probably does. We'll start with Member Lane.
Okay, thank you. Great information. And thank you to all of you for what you do and how hard you work in and every day. I want to go back to the rave and the perimeter system because in the community of Paradise, where the Paradise Fire struck, and I know El Dorado County made a lot of changes based on what was experienced from the Paradise Fire, but their notification system did not go out. It only went to like 10,000 residents. I'm wondering if there's a way of like they do on TV with the public information system to test, if there's a way that we can test that system so that we have a better handle on it when we need it.
Yes, thank you. So, so number one, we have access to Rave to send the alerts to people who have opted in. We also have access to iPAWS wireless emergency alert that gets everybody's cell phone, kind of like an Amber Alert that you would get. So we have two systems we can use: Rave, which is just opt in, or the WIA, that is every cell phone connected to the tower in the area that we draw to alert. So we have two systems for that. We will be doing a test in June, a countywide Rave test in June. We didn't do it last year because we were going to purchase a upgraded platform of Rave that we were told would give us a lot more subscribers, but that ended up not being the case. So we backed out of it. That's what we were waiting for to do the test last year, and didn't work out. So anyhow, it will be tested this June with ability for people to give feedback. So I will tell you all the Rave messages that we've sent since we got Rave, which has been a couple of years now. We had Code Red during Caldor, but it was shortly after that. I would say 99.9% of the feedback where someone said, I didn't get the alert, was when they didn't change their number when they got a new cell phone number. Or when they signed up, the PIN was dropped on an address that was not actually theirs. But I mean, 99.9% the alerts are going through on all the fires we alert on, if people keep their subscriber information updated. Yeah.
I'd like to add that it also goes out to through EAS to TV and radio. So it's the capability to send TV, radio, social media, email, landline, all at once. And we do conduct weekly and monthly tests, as is required to have that capability to alert in the first place.
And also too, on the state level, we have redundancy with the WIA. We actually, for about a week, at the request of Los Angeles County, were putting out alerts as needed because their system went down due to a tower going down.
Member Aldine?
Thank you, and kudos to everyone. Thank you for your presentations this afternoon. I think it's afternoon, yes. It was very informative. I was wondering, I was reading an article about a new directive that's been sent out by the USDA to the U.S. Forest Service about going direct on future fires. Obviously, we have a lot of land that is owned by the U.S. Forest Service, and I'm assuming that you're supportive of that as opposed to utilizing what is called a big box tactic of large scale fire operations. Any comments regarding the go direct directive?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs Association, every agency engaged, including CAL FIRE and the Forest Service, have agreed to direct attack period in the basin. I know there was some discussion during the Tamarack fire and how that came to be. We pressed very hard, and Chief One for the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit is in agreement. All of her assets have been directed, ordered to work with local agencies as well as CAL FIRE and NDF. They will be going direct.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for being here and for what you do. I'm a resident of Douglas County. Special thank you to Douglas County Law Enforcement for the Caldor evacuation. My question actually has to do with my experience in that fire. I had a 2-month-old and a kindergartner about to start school. And as important to me as being evacuated safely was coming home safely. And you guys did such a great job of letting residents know you were patrolling the area when we were gone. It made us feel really safe. And there was such a nice plan to come home. And so any comments, because I think that's such that side of the evacuation, we all want to come home. We want to do it safely without crowding the streets. I'm sure Los Angeles, the traffic there probably saw this. Any thoughts on running tabletops for the repopulating, how that's going, any lessons learned, and anything you want to say to the residents about how to get us home safely so we're not making your jobs harder?
Thank you for the kind compliment. And that's very important to us because I know people want to get home as soon as they can for all kinds of reasons. We have done some training on that. There's a lot of push for reunification and that not just on fires, but all kind of critical incidents and that kind of thing. And a lot of that, the lessons learned, at least for us, came out of the Route 1 shooting down in Las Vegas, you know, where you have visitors, right? And then now you have an event and you're trying to get them paired up with loved ones that may not live in the area, which I think could definitely happen here at the lake, especially in the summertime. So that is a priority, and I think we're much better at it. The perimeter program is going to be a huge game changer in that because it will allow you to look live when you can come home, the route we want you to take when you're coming home. You know, roads still may be closed and that kind of thing. So it'll be much more specific and better information to the individual resident when we give you the green light to go back to your home. So I think that's going to be huge, but we're continually looking at that because we understand that, and that's a huge thing. And the main incident's over, right? But you're still dealing with all kinds of stuff, which is just as important. So.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. It's something sometimes we forget to talk about in public, but it's a question. So the fire's out and everybody wants to go home. There's a whole team of people that come together to ensure repopulation is safe. So after the fire's out, it's sheriff's office, it's fire, it's utilities, it's road department or DOT. It's the water district. You know, is the water safe to drink, or is there a boil water notice needed? Are the roadways safe? Are they energized, lines still down? Is there fire apparatus everywhere? There's a team that comes together and multiple times a day in repopulation phase to determine we are all in agreement that it's safe for people to go home. So people see the smoke is gone, the fire's gone. There's a whole bunch more stuff that may need to happen if there's damage. On that note, when we repopulate, it's always our plan. If there's damage, we let residents in first only for about a day, and then we open it up to everybody else. And that's obviously so residents can go back to their homes that have been damaged without everybody in there just to look around. I have received a handful of comments about our evacuation plan in the basin in regards to how we reopened the basin after Caldor. An evacuation the size of Caldor to check IDs, I guess, at every entrance back into the basin from, Nevada, Placer, Alpine, and westbound 50, that just wouldn't have been feasible to do. It would have caused more traffic and backup, and people would be even more upset with us. They were in traffic on the way out, they're going to be in traffic on the way back in. In addition, closed areas with IDs, a lot of people don't have their correct address on their license. More frustration occurs there. So if there's damage, that's the plan. Hold it for a day for residents only. If there's not damage, we're likely not going to do that. And basin-wide, like Caldor, that wouldn't even have, it would be close to impossible to do that efficiently.
I think one of the things that we look for in evacuation and residents ask for a lot is connectivity of roads to allow for more pathways out in a dangerous situation. What that poses is a challenge then to maintain that area that it sounds like Douglas County did so phenomenally, was to hold that boundary and make sure that the evacuated homes and property are safe. And I think what we see sometimes is people trying to repopulate on their own, which can be dangerous for all of the reasons just listed by El Dorado County. Utilities, power, roadways, embers that may respark. And so my message is please don't try to repopulate on your own without message from authorities saying that it's safe to do so.
And I would say on the state level, we put the committee together up and down the state, made up of professionals from not just the state, but also local fire and law. And we're developing a mass evacuation guide based on best practices that's going to include. So we're really excited about that. We still have a little bit to go, but we understand that, evacuations and then repopulations are extremely important. And I really gotta put a thumbs up for CAL FIRE and their incident management team that they bring. It is, it really has. I've been through these repopulations is like a secret, right? It's like that you can't go in there unless you really have legitimate business, but it's extremely important, like Lieutenant Morton says, and others, of getting people back, but doing it in a systematic way so you don't have everybody flooding in. But so we're hoping this mass evacuation guide will build upon all these best practices.
Thank you. Member Settlemer.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I remember we had a discussion at Arrow Creek, and I think it's just important to state that it's so important that we listen, we communicate, and we work as a team because we don't have enough resources out there. It's just that simple. There's no department that has enough cops or enough fire members to adequately deal with it. So we have to help one another. And we've become phenomenal at that over the last 20, 30 years. I remember prior to that, we had lawsuits against one another, arguing about who was responsible or who got to put out the fire, which seems crazy now that we look back upon that. I'm very grateful that we've come so far. But one of the things I think is important to stress is that it is a team, but you guys are the quarterbacks. And when a notice for evacuation comes, leave. In the Davis fire, we literally had people coming out with their children, walking along the road when they're being told to evacuate, so they can see the fire trucks and they can see the fire. Kind of hard to protect people when they're not protecting themselves. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but just the aspect of, I'm just putting that out there. People need to follow directions because the reality is in the Tahoe Basin especially, it's so dynamic. It depends where this fire starts as far as which your evacuation route will be. Some people continually discuss the idea of a basin-wide evacuation route. I don't think that's possible. I think it's completely dependent on where the fire starts. More of a comment, so sorry.
Well, good afternoon. Can I
Please?
Yeah. Good afternoon. And I want to thank all of you for your incredible work protecting all of us. And I My son is a firefighter, paramedic, worked on North Shore, now works out of the area, but has been on a lot of wildland fires. So I've picked his brain about how I can be safe and what I should do, as well as following orders from my law enforcement, my sheriff. And fortunately or unfortunately, in my years of service here on the board, I've participated and been witness to the mosquito fire, the river fire, and was on scene as the fire came in, Caldor fire, with our CAL FIRE unit chief, to see what was going on and to be better prepared and knowledgeable on the resources needed at a county level to assist all of you. So I want to thank you again for your efforts and all the work you do. We as a land use agency often hear, as we're looking at our projects, about evacuation as a major concern of our residents. We're focused, as you know, in the Basin on very capped development and really focused on redevelopment of our town centers and old dilapidated buildings and updating that. And I wanted to get your thoughts on the concerns you might have on development within the Basin, because that is probably the single most consistent concern we hear on any project we talk about, whether it's a pier, whether it's a new hospital, whether it's a revamped hotel. And so I wanted to see what your concerns were on as it relates to the Tahoe Basin planning for town center redevelopment.
So objectively, from the fire service perspective, and what I would call apolitical. Anytime you have redevelopment where you're taking older buildings that are what we would call pre-existing non-conforming, and then rebuilding, remodeling into something that meets current and standard codes. Best example I can give you locally for my jurisdiction would be the Sugar Pine project. One could argue that now there are more people there and more of a concern. I would argue the opposite and say that that building is constructed to withstand fire. No building is fireproof, but certainly they are hardened, and new codes, new defensible space requirements, sprinklered structure, non-combustible siding, non-combustible roof, double and triple pane windows are a far cry from a Tahoe cabin. So in terms of safety and looking at it objectively from my fire station, anytime you have redevelopment where you're improving upon, not building out like, building out subdivisions, but improving upon the existing, then that's a benefit. There may very well be a time where, we have several hundred people living in the Sugar Pine project, and we get a Caldor fire, which we kind of called the slow moving blob coming up the highway, or the fast moving fire. Either one, we may be instructing those residents to shelter in place. Okay. I'm not going to do that in a 1960s wood shaked neighborhood. There's no way I'm going to tell them to shelter in place. So city centers, the casinos, the restaurants, the hotels, they're built to a higher standard. Redevelopment, in my mind, is always a positive from a fire perspective and an objective look.
I think also when you think about redevelopment, and certainly I've spoken about this with my team a lot, is what are the cascading effects of that development? As mentioned, one of the thoughts is that we're bringing more people in. So what does that mean? And I think if you're also looking at supporting that development with infrastructure or ensuring that it's supported, and that might, a lot, what I hear a lot in Incline Village is roads infrastructure, but I also challenge you to think about communications infrastructure as well. So ensuring cell service or landline capabilities. I think hearing that those things are taken into consideration as part of the strategy for development is really important. So sharing that message, because we're not going off, half-cocked and just developing things left and right because we can, but there is a lot of strategy I know that goes into it. So just making sure that we share that.
Thank you. And one quick second question. The cameras that we have situated around the basin, I know the ones outside the basin have caught spot fires very quickly that CAL FIRE has been able to get on. I assume that you are all supportive of those and expansion of those as well. I'm seeing nods.
Yeah, absolutely. Those cameras are on 24/7 in our dispatch center, and I'm certain that that's the case in ECC down in Camino, on the Placer side, Douglas County, all the above are using those.
I know NV Energy is also using AI to detect spot fires and identify those more quickly as well. Washoe County has also built a dashboard of regional agencies, as we call it. It lives on our website at readywashoe.com. But that tab for the cameras is one of those, as well as perimeter and rave and wind, I think.
Member Hill.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone's time, and this has been a great panel, and we're lucky to have you all in public service because I don't even know how you do your jobs. It seems very stressful for me, but money is no option. What is the one tool or technology or infrastructure? I mean, obviously we all want more people, and perhaps that would be your answer, but the thing that you wish your jurisdiction had the resources for, the one thing that would be interesting for me to hear.
So that's easy for Douglas County. Our existing radio system sucks. So in order to improve that, there's, especially in the basin, there's permitting processes and stuff. And so assistance with that in order to get those sites up or improve on those is huge. It's a heavy lift financially, but the permitting process would be greatly appreciated based on what the need would be.
I would echo that, and I might take it a step further. Every county has their own PSAP, public safety answering point. And so we've got 5, 6 counties that all border this. We've got 2 states, a city. So there's a lot of what's mine is mine. I want to hang on to it. And communications is definitely one of those things. So like for an example, the city is in the middle of redeveloping our entire comm system and dispatch, repeaters, and all the rest. If I had the magic wand or the blank check, there would be a regional single point ordering dispatch center that managed all of those counties in the basin. That's almost an impossible lift. But because we rely on each other and because we're constantly dealing with mutual and auto aid, I can't fill out a first alarm with my city. The first alarm is not coming from my resources. They're coming from my resources, Lake Valley and or Tahoe Douglas. I go to a second alarm, I'm probably into 3 or 4 agencies. So because of that, there's always going to be a delay with my dispatch center contacting Douglas or Camino or Placer, or if I go to 3rd and 4th or general alarm, I'm reaching out to Washoe, I'm reaching out to Carson. Having a single point that could coordinate that would save an awful lot of time, and we would streamline those resources in a hurry. We've talked about in the past about having a Basin communications center, and it's whether it's regulatory issues or just jurisdictional ego at times, to be honest. It's a very difficult lift. So that's my magic wand request.
Secretary Aguilar.
Just thank you. I appreciate what you do.
Member Loomer.
Maybe you kind of following up on Member Hill's questions. I mean, first of all, thank you. I'll echo the thanks that everyone else has said. I had the pleasure of living through and evacuating both Caldor and Tamarack, and then a second time for Caldor because it moved back over to Alpine County. So definitely appreciate like all the work and all the coordination that takes place. I'm kind of, curious on capacity and kind of like the more support that you all need. Curious if any of the cuts at the federal level have impacted any abilities. And then, at the state level, I know California state agencies generally have been asked to sweep vacancies and cut their budgets by 8%. And I'm wondering if that's impacting abilities to, do this type of work and this type of coordination. So, and then, yeah, I'm not as familiar with Nevada, but would welcome input from Nevada as well.
Yeah, from the state level, we were very fortunate that Governor Newsom and apparently the legislature has not cut OES. They see that obviously is important. So we're not looking at any major cuts. Obviously, we're going to do some, but not the personnel. We're in a hiring mode.
I think in Nevada, at the state and local level, no one is questioning the importance of emergency management or what anyone at this table does. And we realize that we are all in it together. At the federal level, I can't speak to what's going on, but what we have seen is a cut of a mitigation grant. So there were multiple mitigation grants. One has now been eliminated, which impacts our ability to build resilience in our communities ahead of a disaster.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that grant? Just briefly, but I'm just curious, like what that grant would have helped fund.
Sure. It was called the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities Grant. And so it allows you to do just that, basically, based on your hazard mitigation plan and the actions that you have identified in that. What we're also seeing is a massive delay in funding due to the in limbo status of FEMA, we'll say. So usually by this time, we've seen Homeland Security funding come out of FEMA, and state and local jurisdictions are able to apply for that. It is what funds perimeter. And so we're now having conversations of what do we do if it doesn't come out, if it never drops, if FEMA is eliminated, because that has been the direction at the federal level. There's an oversight committee and they have stated we would like to eliminate FEMA. We also have the Emergency Management Performance Grant, or EMPG, which funds a lot of positions, mine included, at 100% match. So it's not like local jurisdictions or the states aren't investing in capabilities as well. It's already a year behind in its delivery. However, we're now looking at going a little bit further now. So general fund is supporting these positions and these capabilities for local and state jurisdictions. But now are we going to get reimbursed? Before it was a year late, and now we don't know because it hasn't come out yet.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
We have been impacted in the same ways. And locally, our county leaders invest in emergency services because they see the benefit. One thing I like to point out that I hope never goes away, Cal OES has a LEMA fund, Law Enforcement Mutual Aid Fund. So what law enforcement agencies do is they will send cops to help us for mutual aid when we need it. Then they go to Cal OES and get reimbursed for that. And that is because a lot of agencies can't afford to send 20 cops on overtime during Caldor a month and just eat that cost until there's reimbursement. So what that LEMA fund did was kind of encourage agencies that don't have a large budget to go ahead and help their partner agencies with the ability to go right to Cal OES and get that reimbursement. So that is still in place, and that's amazing. That is probably a very important fund that we hope always stays around. We haven't heard otherwise, but wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Again, thank you for that. And the governor has championed it. I will say that we're very proud of the fact that we can usually turn the reimbursement over, reimburse what we call the providing agencies within 6 months or less, instead of the 2 years plus years it may take.
Member Rice.
I've been sitting here trying to figure out what I was going to say, but what I will say is that I was amazed how we went from chaos to order in such a short period of time. When they cut everybody loose, saying everybody get out, that was a bit of a problem. You can't get there from here, but with the coordination and the attempts at calming the citizens, I was amazed at how quickly things went from the chaos to order. And I've been very, very proud of our sheriff's department. Luckily for me, I was a member of the organization for a short while. And I truly wish that Tahoe Douglas Fire was here, because I am really intrigued by the thought of getting a fire dropping helicopter in the basin. And that's been one of his goals for, I guess, as long as he's been fire chief. And I do hope that somehow or another that happens, because spot fires are hard to get to, especially when everything's uphill. There is nothing downhill here except for a lake, but that's another water dropping situation. Anyway, thank you all for what you do. It was amazing how well after the initial FUPA, how's that for a good word? Everything came together, and I think that it's the coordination and the cooperation with all of the agencies around this lake that made it happen. And thank you all.
Yeah, just echoing thanks, and especially for your coordination today and hearing how closely you all work together. It's really nice to hear. And along those lines, I actually think you probably have some lessons learned that would be helpful in moving faster in the permitting process. So you're talking about the challenges with permitting the radio system. You all coordinate really rapidly when there's an emergency. And I think if that could be applied to needing the radio system upgraded as a preparedness measure, it might help with that cutting green tape discussion and moving permitting processes faster. So even just, writing down a few bullets on who needs to be in the room for that decision-making capacity, I think would be super helpful and could really, serve as a model for moving faster on these types of permits. That's the comment. The question I have kind of builds on what Member Gustafson was talking about. So TRPA, as you heard, we get a lot of interest in how our activity increases risk in the basin. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, what role can this body be playing in the preparedness discussion and in the reactiveness discussion when a fire is underway, right? You all are doing the daily work in that reactiveness time, but in the proactiveness time, what can we be doing to be supportive of your work in these communities?
I think you're doing it. I saw a huge change, and I know Chief Drennan can speak to this after the Angora fire. So allowing individual homeowners to make their property safer, right, by just managing it and stuff. I think that's a huge difference. And having grown up in Douglas County and coming up here as a boy to recreate stuff, and then seeing it working here at the sheriff's office, there's a huge difference in just driving up Kingsbury or down 50 with the work that's being done along the highway that you can just see from the road, as far as making it fireproof or more fire resistance. So I think that's going on, and I would just continue that, and whatever you can do to ensure that it happens or to help it to continue is huge, because that's if there's the less fuel, the less fire. I mean, it's not rocket science. So and I'm not even a fireman, and I know that. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to go back toward the Angora fire, this body was instrumental with TFFT, as was obviously the Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs Association. As a body, our organization, the association, we have focused on fuels management and specifically working toward the evacuation routes, making them safe. Again, the concept is fairly straightforward. If you are in a traffic jam on Highway 89, it would be nice if the 30 feet on either side of you weren't burning. And so making those corridors safe and doing, focusing some fuels management there, and where this body may come into play is that oftentimes takes an awful lot of coordination. If you look at the 89 North corridor alone, you're looking at lands that are owned by the state, by the federal government, by private homeowner, businesses. So we deal a lot with jurisdictional boundary and whose job it is to go put the fire out. But when you're dealing with land ownership that is a patchwork all the way down Highway 89 or Highway 50, it really makes doing one fuels management project difficult. And so, that takes coordination with federal, state agencies, TRPA, LaHunt, you sort of spill out all of the different regulatory agencies. The other component here is the education and the messaging. And so anything you can do when law enforcement's putting out information to replicate that through social media, when fire's putting that stuff out, same. That's always helpful. And I think, having more involvement in terms of at least I think Kat brought it up earlier where, this body doesn't dictate or determine evacuations or fire projects, but you are very good at convening and bringing people together. And so that's where I think there's some real value here whereby, the public can see that there's real collaboration and cooperation taking place. Otherwise, letting me grow up my deck and knock some trees down would be great, but no, I'm kidding.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead.
I'll just echo the same thing, that transportation systems are safe and efficient throughout the county. When we look at evac routes, we're not going to send people down a road with a fire near that there's vegetation growing over the top. It's just going to send them into a bad place. So we already only have a few routes out up here. Probably should make sure the ones we do have are good to go.
Thank you. I was going to go online next, and I'm just going to call you in the order you're on my screen. Member Honigman.
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for all their hard work and great plans for keeping the basin and everyone safe. So thank you so much for all you guys do.
Member Fastinas.
Just want to recognize that interagency cooperation, I think, is the key here, and the fact that we have this as one of our strategic objectives for this upcoming year, I think is the right place to be. And I'm just really encouraged by all your willingness to cooperate and be able to manage these issues cooperatively. It's just having been a long-term state bureaucrat, I know how difficult that is. And I really just want to commend everyone for coming to the table with that kind of an open mind. So thank you.
And Member Bass, I don't know if he's still with us. He was earlier online. Cody? See him. Okay,
He's no longer online, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think that's all of our governing board members online. So with that, since this was informational only, I just want to say, Dr. McIntyre, you weren't kidding. You brought us a deep bench, yourself included. This was incredible. Thank you all. You're so busy. Thank you for the time today. This is much appreciated. Thank you.